Hi, I'm Matthew Faraci. Welcome to Peace and Power Israel, a unique weekly look at the U.S.-Israel alliance from Federal Newswire. Today we have the opportunity to sit down with Congressman Greg Steube from Florida. Congressman Steube has had an outstanding career. If you can think of something adventurous, he's done it. From bull riding to serving in the U.S. Army, not only as a foot soldier, but as an interrogator in Iraq. He serves on the House Intelligence Committee and has very keen insights specifically on how terrorists think, how you defeat terrorism, what the inauguration of President Trump means for Israel and the broader Middle East, and what can be done right now to change not only the dynamic in Israel, but change the dynamic in the Middle East and the world. This is an absolutely fascinating interview with an absolutely fascinating guy. You will never hear this anywhere else. Hi, everybody. I am here with the one, the only Greg Steube, and I don't even know how to describe this guy for you. He's a congressman, but he's really like a combination of Rambo and MacGyver, and but there's a rodeo element too. So I'm trying to think of like the other character I could throw in there. It's really hard. Some Stallone characters, some kind of Matt Damon character. So let me tell you guys why I'm saying that. So he's an attorney, an actual cowboy. He's actually, we're going to talk about this. He's actually done bull riding. Was in the Army from 2004 to 2008. Did a deployment to Iraq. Oh, also was a JAG, because, you know, you might as well do that while you're doing everything else. So Greg's done a little bit of everything, and it's when you meet people like him, it's kind of frustrating because you wonder, what have I been doing with my life? So Greg, welcome to the program.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Good to see you.
So I want to go through these particulars first. So you grew up, you're from Florida, but like Florida.
Yeah, born and raised, 4 generations on one side, 5 on the other. So like what Florida used to look like, what Florida looks like in the middle part of the state, we're losing a lot of that. But think cattle and citrus and, the term, actually I bumped into somebody in the airport. The term Florida cracker is not a derogatory term. It is actually what they used to call cowboys because of the sound of the whip when you would crack the whip.
Oh, that's where it comes from.
Yeah.
So we're talking then, is it fair to say your family goes back to essentially Andrew Jackson type timing?
So on my mom's side, 5 generations. So that was probably at least I don't know. It was my great-great-grandfather who immigrated from Ireland on that side of the family. They had a little horse ranch. And then on my dad's side, my great-grandfather came from Ohio after World War I. So that's basically where he retired. And then my grandfather had a printing business. My dad's first job was at the Lombo Key Police Department. He's 40-something years in law enforcement. So a rich history in Florida, obviously a good knowledge of my district because I grew up in the district I represent.
Sarasota is one of the name some of the towns that people would know.
Lombo Key, where Dad's first police job was, the city of Sarasota, Venice, Northport, which aren't real well known. Everybody kind of knows where Sarasota is, but that's more southern. And then I represent Charlotte and Lee counties. And
you actually grew up bull riding.
So my background, probably high school, middle school. Yeah, because we moved way out into the country when I started high school. No, when I started middle school, and there was nothing out there. There's literally nothing but cattle and citrus. So my first job when I was 13 was on a cutting horse operation. It was where I kind of cut my teeth on working with animals and building fence and that kind of stuff. Graduated from horses to cattle and then worked on a place called Kibler Ranch. The ranch is still there, but the owner's not there anymore. It's changed hands a couple of times. A lot of the property is now being used for pickle farming or cucumber farming. And learned to cowboy on Kibler Ranch, learned how to work cows on Kibler Ranch and ride and rope. And I started riding bulls probably my junior year in high school, which is not the smartest thing to do, but it was a lot of fun.
So I'm guessing that between you and Mark Wayne Mullen, that would be the bull riding caucus.
So I think he did bulldogging, and then Rick Crawford from Arkansas was a saddle bronc rider. So you've got a few guys in Congress that actually have a kind of a background in that and kind of grew up in that, which is kind of fun.
How does that train? How does that train you for Congress?
Well, dealing with the stuff that's in the arena, which is why I wear boots up here in Washington, because there's a lot of that up here in Washington. But it doesn't. But it gives you a good background of America and a good background of like the heart of my district. My district used to be very rural. I used to have 9 counties, and now I have 3, which we called it the heartland of Florida. So you had that kind of background, and very few members of Congress have a production agricultural background, which is huge, not just for Florida, because that's one of the huge pillars economically of Florida's economy. But it's obviously big up here because we're drafting a farm bill, we're drafting agricultural policy, and it's important to have members that have a production agricultural background. And also, I believe that understand how to work hard and understand what our farmers and ranchers are facing.
Yeah, you have to know. Yeah, you have to know what people are like, the shoes that people are in. And there's been a lot of, I think, criticism sometimes in Congress because it used to be more diverse, and I don't mean diversity in the modern sense of the word, but that you had farmers and police officers and soldiers, and so yeah, that's an important element. And did you grow up in a faith-based house?
Yeah, so my grandfather on my mom's side was a Methodist minister. So we would typically go to a Methodist church. I grew up in the Methodist church. My family's always been Methodist. And so kind of grew up in the church. Obviously in the military, my faith had a large part of, your service, serving in a deployed environment. And then since probably for the last 7 to 8 years, my wife and I have been in a Bible-based non-denominational church, which we love. It's called Bayside. They have like 9 or 10 different campuses and like 30,000 members. So they broadcast it out. You can watch it from anywhere. And we've really grown in our faith walk during that period of time. But our church family is great. We actually saw our lead pastor at the Christian Gala.
Yeah.
This past weekend.
Oh, yeah. So Congressman and I both had the chance to go to the Christian Inaugural Gala, which was a great event.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun.
Great event. The inauguration events can be quite exhausting, and I found that one uplifting.
Yes.
Yeah.
And a lot of, you had Danny Goki sing, and you had Dutch Sheets speak. You had a lot of people in the faith community, obviously. If people listen to Christian radio, they know who Danny Goki is. And to hear him, it's interesting because you hear some people live who are recording artists.
Yeah.
And you're like, they don't sound as good as they do, on a record. Danny sounded amazing in person. He just literally had a microphone in his hand. So it's interesting to get that, like, that guy clearly has a gift of his voice that God has given him. And even in person on just a microphone, he sounded incredible. There
was that amazing moment during inauguration where I really want to know what that was like there. You had some kind of audio problem and right? And
with Carrie Underwood.
Yeah, there was some kind of delay. You could see it on TV where everybody was kind of like, what's going on? What did you see happen there?
So
what could she sing?
Yeah, I guess what she wanted to play as background music to the song that I think it was America the Beautiful. Whatever song she was singing, they couldn't get it to play. So then you saw a little Air Force guy who was kind of running the show, run up and tell her you need to do it a cappella. So then she's like, okay, here we go. Well, what was interesting was the moment she started singing, it's a song that everybody knows. And if you've ever been in the Rotunda, it's a beautiful place. And the acoustics in there are amazing. So once she started to sing, everybody in the Rotunda started to sing, and you could hear everyone singing, and you really couldn't hear her. You could hear everybody else because the sound kind of ricochets.
Oh, that's fascinating.
But she was actually, I don't know if you noticed after she got done singing, but she kind of looked at everybody else and was like thanking everybody because everybody kind of chimed in. It was a beautiful moment, but that was I think the hiccup was whatever it was she was wanting to have played as background music didn't start. So
I thought it was
literally
better.
read the guy's lips because he comes running up and he tells her, his back was to me, but he tells her, you're going to need to sing it a cappella. And you could see her say, I need to sing it a cappella. kind of like, I have to
Like,
do this
are you
right
for
now.
real? Like,
And then she just started singing. And then she was like, okay. And then she just started singing, and everybody kind of chimed in. It was pretty nice.
for our listeners, I mean, since you had, I was at a watch party at the Museum of the Bible, which was quite fun. But for our listeners, what was it like to be there? Because for many of the people I spoke to, they thought it was the most amazing inauguration they'd ever seen. And these are people that had seen all of them going back to, Nixon or before that. What was it like actually being there that, like you just said, on television, when Carrie Underwood was singing, all you could hear was her and you could hear the people in the background a little bit, but it was an amazing thing. You thought it was better than if there had been music, but what was the rest of the experience like?
So the acoustics in there are incredible. So the tenor that sang the national anthem, he sung another song. He was also incredible. And you could just hear his voice echoing off the rotunda. It was a beautiful ceremony. The way everything kind of flowed was very good. I was totally expecting Trump to speak for an hour and a half, and he only spoke for like 15, 20 minutes, which I think, given the moment, was appropriate.
Was appropriate, yeah.
He went through what we're going to do, and he went out and started doing it. I've never been to another inauguration. The last one was Biden when I was in office, but because of COVID,
right,
like there wasn't a lot of people that were allowed to attend. I had a lot of people that obviously were very disappointed who came up and wanted to see it outside. But given it was feels like 5 degrees, given the weather situation, and I think probably security posture had a bit to play in that as well. It was a beautiful ceremony, and you can't fit that many people in that room. And you had, kind of the who's who of Trump's campaign, his family, guys like Zuckerberg, guys like the president from Argentina was there. So it was kind of interesting, the who's who that was in the room. All the cabinet officials were there, all the members, well, not all, but the people of Congress that wanted to come. It was a beautiful ceremony.
And you're on because I thought it was really cool that it was in the people's house. In other words, it felt like the people's moment. For all, I know people wanted to go, but for everybody watching it, it felt like the people's inauguration, which was very appropriate. And then you saw the president with the hostages. Actually, one girl who's, I want to say famously, but very sad, the girl that was thrown on the motorcycle. She was there with him in the arena. So you already saw a change in policy towards Israel within day one. There was some executive order on UNRWA. What was some of the other stuff that you...
he immediately signed tons of executive orders on the border. I haven't actually even had a chance to go through all of the EOs that he has done, but it's all of the things. The great thing about President Trump is he does what he says he's going to do. And if he said he's going to shut down the border on day one, he did it. And he did a whole host of other executive orders on the immigration, a whole host of issues on, I don't think he's done the tariffs yet, but I think there's going to be a period of time that's probably going to happen. And you're not going to see a stronger ally for Israel than President Trump. You saw it before. You're going to see it again. We already have seen what Hamas has responded to in just the threat that, hey, if you guys don't have a deal done by the time I swear in, there's going to be hell to pay. And people believe him because they know he's going to actually follow through with that, as he should. And I think we should be and we will be much stronger as it relates to fighting terrorism, national security, standing with our nation and our allies. And I'm excited to see what Trump has in store.
And I want to get into that because you served in the Middle East, and this is very relevant because we have allowed terrorists to run amok. We've seen terrorism in our own country recently. What did you learn from your experience in Iraq that people listening don't understand about the mentality of the people that we're dealing with?
So just so your listeners understand what I did, I was an infantry officer. I enlisted after law school. So the towers were hit my first semester of law school. I finished law school early and enlisted, went in as an infantry guy, went to officer candidate school, got commissioned as an infantry officer, went through infantry commission school, was commissioned as an infantry officer. I got injured in Ranger school, so I branch transferred to the JAG Corps because I already had my law degree. So because of that, I was always in an infantry division because they typically want to take guys with that type of background in those units.
And when you get injured in a special unit like that, you're just out. They just can't.
Well, because I had my law degree, they just branch transferred me, which is
Okay.
also odd. That doesn't happen a lot. But I was in the infantry branch. They moved me to the JAG Corps. And so when I deployed, I was the chief of detainee operations for Multinational Division North. So everything and anything to do with detainees was my responsibility. I had a team. There was 3 of us. I had an intel guy, myself, the legal side, and then a PMO, which is your military police in the Army. And we, the 3 of us, cohesively decided what we did with the bad guys we caught. So I know I've been involved in interrogations. I've been involved in inspecting detention facilities. I've been involved in planning missions, all of those type of things after Abu Ghraib, because there was a lot of DOD policy as it relates to treatment of detainees. And I was involved in all of that. So I have a unique experience militarily in a classified environment dealing with detainees. I also prosecuted cases in the Iraqi criminal justice system. So the goal strategically at the 30,000 feet level was we want to try to prosecute as many of these terrorists as we can in their own judicial system. Because then the Iraqis will start to believe that their government is not corrupt, that
Right.
the legal system is working, that they're starting to have faith in their own government. That was the goal. Obviously, not everybody we prosecuted that way. And if they were intelligence holds, like higher value targets, they would go in a different place so we could gather intel. It just kind of depended, but the goal was to try to prosecute them in their own judicial system. I was involved in some of that. We would prosecute cases in Baghdad at the Central Criminal Court of Iraq, and there's an investigative judge hearing, and then there's an appeal. So from a knowledge of terrorism and dealing with people who are involved in terrorism, I kind of have a unique understanding of what that's like. And I don't remember if I was talking to the president or talking to somebody else, but they believe terrorists respect 2 things, power and money. And if you come across as, hey, this is what we're going to do, and if you don't do it, this is what's going to happen. And I'll never forget, President Trump told me a funny story when he first came into the office the last time. He told, he arranged a satellite conference with the leader of the Taliban. And they had prepared a place. It was actually the Taliban leader's house, but he didn't know this at the time. So they were having a conversation. The president told the leader of the Taliban that if you touch a hair on any of my guys, this is the first place I'm going to hit. And then they showed him a picture of his own house. And so
Wow.
The entire time that Trump was president and Taliban was operating in Afghanistan, none of our guys were killed, injured, attacked during that period of time, because they knew if they did, there was going to be hell to pay. And so just that strength from the leader of our nation changes behavior. He didn't have to do anything. He didn't have to put boots on the ground. He didn't have to bomb anything. He didn't have to do anything. He told the leader of the Taliban, if you touch any of my guys, this is what's going to happen to you. And this is the first place we're going to hit. It suddenly changes behavior. The Biden administration opened up billions of dollars to the Iranians, which funded a lot of this. If you go back and look, it was either 60 or 30 or 60 days before the Hamas terrorist attacks, Blinken released $350 million in humanitarian aid to the Gaza Strip, which we all know goes to Hamas. Like any leader in the world will tell you, if you give money to Gaza, it's going to go to Hamas because they run Gaza. And so $350 million of American taxpayer dollars goes to Gaza. A month later, they're invading and one of the worst attacks on Jewish people since the Holocaust. And we helped fund that. The Biden administration helped fund that.
So stunning.
And so it's very frustrating. All of that type of behavior from our government's not going to happen anymore because we have Trump in charge now. We have a Republican House and a Republican Senate. But it's amazing to me that you would think the Democrats' thought process is appeasement. If we make them happy, they won't do anything bad. That's not what terrorists respect. Terrorists respect strength and money, which when they got that $6 billion, the Iranians used that to fund terror. And so having a president now that's willing to tell terrorists, we're going to take you out. There will be hell to pay if the hostages aren't released by the time I'm president. Changes behaviors immediately.
So many things going through my head right now. The utter stupidity of that is hard to absorb. Do you also think then it's fair to say that a lot of the campus protests and other garbage that we've seen was also somehow the money came from us? Went to Iran and then came back?
And then through different not-for-profits. Yeah. There was, and I could go back and cite some of the different articles that have done some research on this. But if you look at the different organizations that were involved in the protests on the campuses, the money was either funneled through leftist progressive organizations, some of which get taxpayer funding, or from different international groups that can launder the money through not-for-profits. You see that all the time.
But, okay, maybe I'm being logical here, Congressman, but when you see this doesn't work, why not reverse course at that point?
Well, the Democrats believe in just having as much, payment for whatever and doling out money. We, as Republicans, and now having the House, are going to cut all of that kind of funding. So I'm actually looking forward to the appropriations process. I'm looking forward to cutting spending. I'm looking forward to cutting, one of the executive orders was getting us out of the WHO. He just did that yesterday.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of things like that have money tied to it that we won't be doing anymore.
So, okay, so just those simple steps, do we think, and I know the president has also said already that if you support Hamas protests on campus, you're losing your federal funding. Is that an executive order type thing, or does Congress have to take action on that, or both?
So it could be both. If I was him and I wanted to do that, so Congress appropriates the money, but the executive determines how they spend it within the confines of how Congress has appropriated it. It doesn't mean they have to spend it. Trump can do away with entire agencies of the federal government if he wants to by just not spending the money. Congress appropriated, he doesn't have to spend it. So that's how, he can do it with the WHO and get out of that by executive order. I'm sure there's money that was appropriated in the last CR that I voted against, but passed through the process to fund those type of things. He's just not going to spend the money on that. So there's broad authority in the executive branch to take the money that was appropriated, and he doesn't have to spend any of it if he doesn't want to, and it just goes back to Treasury. So there's a lot of flexibility for him. Now, the other side of that, the way the Democrats operated, is they would take money that wasn't appropriated for certain things and give it. I mean, look at all the money that Biden gave out right before he left office. He gave billions of dollars to Africa for some program when you've got people in my district still reeling from hurricanes, people in North Carolina still reeling from hurricanes, literally people's houses burning in California, and he's giving money to Africa, billions of dollars of our taxpayer dollars.
And you see all this, Greg. What do you think when you're looking at all this? And again, you've got this fighting terror background. You're on the House Committee on Intelligence. What do you see happening here in the near future in Israel and in the Middle East in terms of defeating these horrible people? I mean, so those are some steps that it sounds like the campus protests should evaporate pretty quickly. The money from Iran's going to dry up pretty quickly.
Well, and I wouldn't be surprised if Trump re-sanctions them, as he should.
Okay.
And then puts in real sanctions against Russia and China and the Iranians, so that what they were doing is funneling money. So the Biden administration put in basically fake sanctions, saying that they sanctioned the Russians or they sanctioned the Iranians, when in fact they didn't do it in a way that prevented them from moving money around. So the Russians would then spend money on Iranian oil, or the Iranians would pay the Russians for weapons. And there was no sanctions put in place of people doing business with the Russians or the Iranians or the Chinese that Trump had in place that prevented the $6 billion of money that was sitting around that the Biden administration released to them. So there's a lot of things that the president can do unilaterally as it relates to that, which I think is going to immediately curb behavior. We saw right before the election, the Iranian attack, again, trying to, the missiles and all this other kind of stuff, that most of the stuff got shot down. But then when Israel responded, you saw the Iranians say that they were going to retaliate. And then Trump gets elected. Whatever happened to that retaliation? Because the Iranians know that if they retaliate again against Israel, that Trump's going to come back and smack them. He's going to reinstitute sanctions. He's going to come at, I wouldn't be surprised, militarily. So there's the election of President Trump for Israel, I think, is historic. It is huge because it's going to, one, curb behavior, and two, be able to fight against the type of terrorist groups that are operating around the world.
And how do we, in your view, Congressman, how do we prevent a nuclear Iran? I mean, they're close. By every indicator, they're close.
I'm shocked that Israel hasn't taken out their nuclear sites. I don't know how far along they are. I've never received a briefing on that, but I would imagine that our president, Trump, is not going to allow Iran to get a nuclear weapon.
That would be a game changer, to say the least. Them getting one, and the president preventing them one. What do you see in terms of the U.S.-Israel alliance? One of the things that a lot of people are talking about is, first of all, that it's not a U.S. client state thing. It's a partnership. For example, one Israeli general told us that Israel's been helping America develop hypersonic weapons, for example. There's a lot of back and forth, technology, intelligence, all that kind of stuff. So in this next period here, as a member of Congress, what are some things you'd like to see happen? What do you think, even in your own capacity, might be able to put together on the committees you're on?
Yeah, there's been a ton of working together between Israel and America as it relates to exchanging intelligence, exchanging patents, exchanging discoveries of things. That has been, I don't have the list in front of me, but there's been a whole bunch of different items that Israel has created that we have used, and the Americans have created and Israel has used. So it's a great partnership there, and it's our one true ally in the Middle East. So you can't rely upon a lot of these other partners or actors that are around the Middle East. Israel's it. And after you've pulled out significant resources out of Iraq, you don't have really a stability there or an American presence there, and I don't think we should, because you can operate now. In today's technology, you can operate. I mean, Trump took out Soleimani without having a single boot on the ground in Baghdad. So you have the ability to strike all across the world, anywhere you need to strike, with the capabilities that we have. So I don't think you need boots on the ground in these different areas. And Trump doesn't, I don't believe, think that we should. He would have pulled out of Afghanistan, but he would have done it much different. He would have followed the guidelines and the agreement that they had with the Taliban, and the Biden administration completely violated it. So it's a great relationship of nations between Israel and the United States. And I think that will not only continue, but get better with the two leaders.
What do you see happening in some of these now dangerously new places like Syria, which lost a dictator, fine, but now it's run by maybe crazier people at this point?
I agree with Trump. I don't think America should be getting involved in any conflict there, at least at this time. I just don't see what America's interest is in doing that. I believe our interest should be focused on Israel and helping them in any way we can. I have repeatedly not supported money going to Lebanon and money going to Iraq.
Wait, can we talk about this? Wait a minute. We send money to Lebanon?
Yep. And
the place that's controlled by Hezbollah.
Yep. And
just to be clear,
a lot of my Republican colleagues vote for it.
Why?
Their argument is it is the thumb in the spigot of releasing and making that country worse than it already is. And I said, okay, so we're giving, I think it's hundreds of millions of dollars to the Lebanese army that we know is going to Hezbollah, and then they're shooting rockets into Israel, and you don't think that that's a problem. They think that if we stopped doing that funding, that all of the Lebanese army would suddenly be terrorists and Hezbollah and attacking Israel, which is basically what's happening now anyways.
Right.
So I think you're going to have a Trump administration that probably thinks the way I think about that. And if they're stupid enough to do that, they're going to do that at their own peril with the United States standing alongside Israel. And I just think the behavior will change. I don't think we should be funding it.
Okay, so keep going. So you were saying we were giving money to Lebanon. Where else?
Iraq.
Yeah. And now Iraq is like completely run by Iran at this point.
Correct. And then you've got all of these different humanitarian organizations that are basically subterfuge for terrorist organizations, like humanitarian aid to Gaza. Well, we know that's going to Hamas.
That's called tunnel building funding.
Hundreds of millions of dollars of our taxpayer dollars are going in the name of humanitarian aid that's being used by terrorists, not only against our allies, but also against us because they hate us.
This is so crazy. You see this if you think about the amount of humanitarian aid, in air quotes, that's gone to Gaza. Everybody there should have two Range Rovers, 5-bedroom house. I mean, seriously. right?
Well, and all the Hamas leaders are living in like Bahrain, and they're billionaires. So they're taking all the money, and then people that actually live in Gaza are, beyond poor. They don't even have potable water. So it's an interesting scenario where the leaders of Hamas take the money for obviously their own benefit, and the actual people that Democrats believe should be getting the money, then that's why they're giving it. They never get that money, which is why we need to be cutting it off. And if you cut it off, you change the behavior. If you're not giving hundreds of millions of dollars to Gaza humanitarian aid, you're not funding Hamas. If you're cutting off and sanctioning the Iranians, Hamas isn't getting money, Hezbollah is not getting money, and the Houthis aren't getting any money. All these Iranian proxy groups all across the Middle East will be literally cut off.
Right. You can't fire missiles if you can't buy missiles.
Yeah.
Right.
And Trump said, and this is, you just go back and look at it, Iran was broke when he left office. And suddenly it got reversed because of the administration of Biden, who opened up all this money to them.
So in one sense, I'm thinking phase one, you're looking at sort of reshaping the Middle East by just cutting off the funding to the bad guys. In another phase, more an expanded version of the Abraham Accords possible, you think?
I think Trump's looking into that.
Yeah.
They had great success in that. I mean, when has that ever happened in history where you have different Middle Eastern countries Arab countries coming into an agreement with Israel on trade or anything like that? So the Arab Accords were a historic trade agreement and agreement between nations that wouldn't have happened but for the Trump administration.
Do you see the possibility of a free Iran? I mean, I believe, Congressman, if I'm right, it was 2012, if I'm correct, when there was an uprising in Iran of the young people, and Obama famously said not a word in support. And so it just died. And a lot of people have felt that if America would just say, we're with you. We know you hate these horrible people that are terrorizing you. You're all hostages in your own country with your government. I've heard a lot of talk that the regime in Iran is very unstable because the economy is so bad.
About to get worse thanks to Trump.
Okay, that's the point. Do you see, a Middle East where like that's possible, where Iran's could actually go back to, dare say, maybe even being an ally like it was before the revolution?
Yeah, I've met with countless Iranians that come here, Iranian Americans that are originally from Iran, but are obviously citizens of our country now, that support a free Iran. There's big organizations that are very involved in that are trying to basically create an Iran. I think once their leadership is taken out, I think you would see that. I think you would see actually a democratic nation in Iran, but you're going to have to take out those leaders and the leadership and all the different terrorist cells that are operating there.
So if you're looking threats to the U.S. and Israel, how can we reverse the momentum that China and Russia have made over the last 4 years?
Again, we can do so much economically, which is why Trump loves tariffs. You can change behavior with tariffs because you're talking about billions, if not trillions of dollars in trade advantages that China has, in sanctioning ability that the president has as it relates to the Iranians and the Russians. I mean, just the Nord Stream 2 pipeline that Trump had sanctions on. When Biden came in, he released the sanctions on the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, which opened up billions of dollars of revenue into the Kremlin. If they wouldn't have done that, I don't believe. Well, Zelensky himself said that the Russians wouldn't have had money to fund the war. But when Biden opened and released the sanctions on the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, that opened billions of dollars of revenue into Moscow, which allowed him to fund the war in Ukraine. So there's a lot that we can do without sending fighter jets up and sending out ships and doing that kind of thing economically through strong America First policies, whether it be tariffs, whether it be sanctioning terrorist regimes or countries that support terrorist organizations. There's a new day. I mean, as Trump says, there's a golden age of America coming, and we're at the precipice of that. And I'm excited about the things that he's going to do. And again, he's only got 4 years. So he knows he doesn't have a lot of time to get things done.
Right.
And he's only got 2 years before there's another House election and another Senate election. So there is a lot of impetus and a lot of we've got to get this done today and as soon as possible. And I think that's going to drive a lot of really good decisions really early on that I think the country is going to see. We want to get a tax package done out of the House by March so that the American people before the next elections can feel what it feels like to have renewed tax cuts and those type of things and not a tax increase. So things like that, the president realized that we have to do very soon. And I think that they're moving on these things as we speak.
What do you see? We've talked a lot about the administration, but what do you see Congress in this period needing to do, particularly to legislate change to this insanity? Well, in terms of foreign policy, I know that
stop funding all of these stupid, ridiculous humanitarian aid type things that end up getting funneled to terrorism. I would do away with it, the entire USAID. I would do away with it. They've already gotten out of Trump has already gotten us out of the WHO. I don't know why we're a part of the UN when other countries don't pay their fair share.
Right. We fund the people that oppose us.
And right. It's run by China, and there's all these it's a joke. You've got this Human Rights Council that is run by the Chinese, who are the worst offenders of human rights in the world, but it's run by the Chinese. And why are we a part of an organization that is undermining the America First agenda, undermining the U.S. and our allies? So I've constantly filed bills to get us out of that. I think the president's going to be a little softer in that. Hey, if you guys pay, you other nations, you European nations, pay your fair share. But I don't think they can even afford doing that.
So do you think legislatively, the kind of proposals you're talking about, do you think there's enough momentum behind that Congress will pass some of those provisions?
I hope so, because we have to cut like $2 trillion to $2.5 trillion. And what a better place to start than foreign aid that goes to terrorists.
Yes, I was going to say.
Why are we giving $400 million to Jordan for them to create and build their border wall when we're not building our own border? So there are a lot of things like that that will add up very quickly to $2.5 trillion. And a conservative like myself, I'm not going to vote for a budget bill that doesn't have cuts in it. Like, we should be balancing our budget. I came from Florida. I was in the Florida House and the Florida Senate, and we are required by constitutional amendment to balance our budget every year. And what a blessing that is, because it forces the legislature to make tough decisions. When I first got elected, we had kind of a decrease in revenues, kind of a small recession, if you will. After I got elected in 2010, we had to cut $8 billion, which is a lot to the state budget. When the state budget's $80 billion, you got to cut.
So a big cut.
$8 billion. That's a big number. When we had to make tough decisions. You know, a lot of these programs that maybe members supported had to get cut, and we had to make those tough decisions. It would be a blessing if we had to do that in Washington, but we have to get ourselves on the path to a balanced budget. It's not going to happen overnight. We're $36 trillion in debt, but at some point it's going to be a huge economic drown. It is now, but it's going to be worse on our economy when you've got portions of Medicare that are going to be bankrupt in the sense of they'll be expending more money than they're taking in like a couple of years. Same with Social Security. And that's just the mandatory spending. And then you got all this stuff that Biden giving billions of dollars to Africa for whatever, humanitarian aid in other countries, when we have Americans who don't have houses in California, Americans who don't have houses in Florida because they were ripped off their foundations in hurricanes, Americans in North Carolina who don't have houses because they were ripped off in hurricanes. Yet this previous administration was more focused on giving money to foreign entities than they were helping Americans that were suffering.
Foreign entities supporting terrorism, I would feel like that would be one of the easiest possible cuts that could be made.
Yeah.
And then, so assuming you get all that done, which I think you will, a lot of people think you will, how does that reshape the Middle East? 4 years from now, what's possible? I mean, dream a little with me.
It reshapes the Middle East because now Iran didn't retaliate against Israel because they knew that Trump would take out their nuclear sites or take out whatever it is. I mean, so it's already, even before Trump became president yesterday, it was already reshaping the way that terrorists operate because they know that he's going to be a strong leader for our country. It's going to change the financial aspect by sanctioning and not giving them money. And then it changes the national security perspective by the fact that, hey, if you do something, like there is no way. Well, one, Hamas would have never attacked if Trump was president.
Right.
It would have never happened. financially, we already talked about that. They wouldn't have had the money to do it. But secondly, they wouldn't have done it because they knew that Trump would take them out.
Right.
We're 480 days or something, 472, 480 days where hostages are being held. American hostages.
I was just going to say,
we still have 4.
When did we tolerate Americans being taken hostage? When did that start?
Years.
Right.
And we have a government that was unwilling to do anything about it. I have a constituent, the father of Sagi Dekel Chen, that lives in my district. So I've had a lot of conversations with some of the families of the hostages. He's still one of the 4 remaining Americans that is being held. The good thing is in part of these talks, he's in that first group. So his family didn't even know he was alive. So now that he's going to be exchanged, they know at least he's alive, and they can hope for the fact that soon they're going to be reunited with their family. But since when in America would we be fine with American citizens being held captive by a globally recognized terrorist organization for 480 days and not do anything kinetically about it? Have we sent in the SEALs to go get them? Have we sent in special forces guys to go get them? We have the capability to do that. We have the greatest military in the world. We've done nothing but sit back and give Hamas and Iran more money and try to quote unquote negotiate when Hamas is going to use that knowing that Biden wasn't going to do anything to them. So it's a new day in America now with Trump as president.
I want to ask you this. Before your time and my time, there was a foreign policy there was a consensus in Congress. There was some disagreement over this and that, but generally speaking, Congress disagreed on domestic policy, but was very united on foreign policy. For example, during the Cold War, it was just how to defeat the Soviet Union. It wasn't like the Democrats were for the Soviet Union okay. Do you think it's at all possible that we could return to that kind of and why was it that way? Because it's common sense. When I hear you describe these things, the only thing I can think is, are these people crazy? I hate to say it that way, but how on earth could you be for these policies? Left, right, whatever, just common sense. Do you think that there's a possibility that we could return to more of a consensus on foreign policy? Do you see that with your other colleagues on the Intelligence Committee?
I think it's going to happen. I think it's going to be a lot better than it was under Biden because Democrats were stuck in between. They couldn't be tough on China while Joe and his family are taking millions of dollars from the Chinese Communist Party. So I think you'll see some of that, but I have been amazed at how far left the Democrats have gone that have scared the moderates in their party, if there's any left. And point in case, and I'll give you an example from yesterday. At the inauguration, President Trump in his speech said, "We're only going to recognize 2 genders, male and female." Mm-hmm. He said that in his speech. Everybody gets up and claps, except Democrats. So even to something as scientific and simple as there's only a male and a female. There are not 74 genders that you want to say that's how you feel. Right. Democrats, more moderate Democrats couldn't even stand up and clap for, hey, we're only going to recognize 2 genders because we've gotten way off here with the progressive left, redefining what a woman is, and there's no definition. You can be whatever you want to be.
Right.
So I think with foreign affairs, I'm hopeful. There will be some. I mean, you saw a handful of Democrats vote in favor of the Laken Riley Act. It just passed, I think it was 64 senators that voted for that. So that would be, 10 Democrats that voted, 11 Democrats that voted for that in the Senate. Now it's coming back and we'll pass that out. There was a number of Democrats that voted for that. So on some things, you're going to see them try to be more collegial and moderate on. I hope foreign policy is one of those areas. But as you can see with the gender obviously debate, they're not even willing to support that.
Okay, and final question for you, Congressman. The BRIC countries have really come together during this last 4 years. Do you see, is it possible to reverse the momentum of this? Because they're behind this too. I mean, all these BRIC countries, right. There's a lot, we don't have time today, but I've read a lot about like terrorist cells and stuff in South America and in Mexico, connected to Hamas, etc. Do you think it's possible to achieve some real wins and weaken the grip of the BRIC alliance?
I can only imagine what Trump has in mind to deal with that. Obviously, it's one, he's focusing on one thing at a time. Let's secure our border. Let's not let these people in. Let's get all these criminals out. Let's get all these terrorists out that have gotten into our country, 12 million of them over the last 4 years. But I absolutely think it's going to be peace through strength. It's going to be strength in the White House again. It's going to be somebody that cares about America first and not foreign entities. So I imagine those groups. I saw that Russia is already pushing back on the whole Panama Canal thing. So I think they're already starting to kind of freak out as to what President Trump's going to do to push his America First agenda. So I think absolutely there's going to be a big change in the world. And just from a border perspective in the South American countries, I've had the opportunity to go to Guatemala, and they wanted a wall in Guatemala to keep all of the South Americans coming up through Central America that would just go through Mexico and then come to the border to prevent them from doing that. I think you're going to see things like that because they're going to want to change their behavior to have relationships with the United States. So I'm very much looking forward to what the president's going to do in foreign affairs.
Congressman, we're going to have to check in with you again in a couple months if you'll permit us and get an update. This
Sure.
was like a walk around so many things. And it's so fun to listen to you because you actually know what you're talking about. So thank you for being on the program, and we really appreciate your time.
Yeah, anytime. Thank you.